Savannah Lane arrived in Austin on a Thursday afternoon, dragging two hard-shell suitcases through the narrow glass doors of a downtown high-rise Airbnb. She'd booked it for 3 nights, just enough time to shoot some exclusive content, update her page, and maybe catch a view of the city skyline from the 19th floor. Savannah wasn't new to this rhythm. She'd been running her OnlyFans for over 2 years, traveling solo, shooting everything herself, and disappearing just as quietly when the content was done. There were no managers, no crew, no assistants, just Savannah, her ring light, and a camera mounted on a collapsible tripod. She checked in under her real name, used the keypad like she'd done at dozens of rentals before, and left a polite message for the host. Then she shut the door, pulled the blackout curtains tight, and went quiet. That was normal. Silence was part of her workflow. On social media, Savannah was loud, animated, always in control. Offline, she was the opposite, soft-spoken, careful, private. Even those who followed her religiously knew very little about where she lived, who she spent time with, or what her real schedule looked like. That privacy was intentional. It had to be. For the first day and a half, everything seemed typical. She posted one teaser photo on Instagram, a half-lit shot of her legs against the balcony glass, and hinted at something spicy dropping soon. Her fans responded in the thousands. But after that, nothing. No posts, no uploads, no replies. For Savannah, going dark for more than 24 hours during a scheduled shoot was unusual. On Reddit threads, a few die-hard followers noted the silence, but chalked it up to editing delays. Others joked that she was probably just enjoying the hotel minibar. In the real world, no alarms went off. Her mom, Dee Lane, hadn't spoken to her in nearly 3 weeks. They'd had a strained relationship ever since Savannah left her small Texas hometown and started her online career. Her best friend from high school had moved across the country. There were no roommates, no boyfriend, no business partners to notice the silence. Savannah's independence had been both her shield and her curse. There was no one to check in when things went wrong. By the 5th day, a few concerned fans began messaging the Airbnb host directly. One of them, posing as her cousin, claimed she might be missing. The host, confused and slightly irritated, contacted Airbnb customer support and reported a possible overstay. The checkout date had passed, but the smart lock app still showed the apartment was occupied. The host assumed she'd left late or forgotten to log out. It wouldn't be the first time. But the messages didn't stop. In fact, they increased. A few of Savannah's higher-tier subscribers, those who had spoken to her in private chats, started piecing together timelines. She'd promised a live stream that never happened. She'd posted a preview video, then nothing. A fan-run Discord server created a timeline thread, noting the last known activity from her verified Instagram, posted exactly 5:42 p.m. on the day she checked in. After that, all accounts went silent. Her location tags vanished. Her OnlyFans didn't show any scheduled posts in the queue. Back in Austin, the building's property manager received a complaint about a smell, faint, sour, unpleasant, from the hallway near Savannah's unit. That was 8 days after her supposed checkout. The manager filed a maintenance ticket but didn't consider it an emergency. People cooked all sorts of things in those units. Leftovers, takeout, broken fridges, it all blended together. 10 more days passed. Then, something snapped into focus. Savannah's rent back home was unpaid. A default warning showed up in her leasing app. Her mail began to pile up at her apartment doorstep. When a neighbor called her name and got no answer, she messaged Savannah's mother on Facebook. Dee checked her daughter's profile, noticed the date of her last post, and only then began to panic. That's when she called the Austin Police Department and filed a missing person report, 18 days after Savannah had checked into the Airbnb. It had taken nearly 3 weeks for the world to notice that Savannah Lane, a woman watched by tens of thousands every day, had completely disappeared. There had been no screaming, no calls for help, no broken windows, no witnesses. Just a door quietly shut behind her and a growing silence that now seemed impossible to ignore. And by the time authorities arrived at the apartment for a welfare check, what they found inside only deepened the mystery. The silence from Savannah Lane's accounts had stretched into its second week. For most influencers or creators, a break from posting might have passed unnoticed. But Savannah wasn't like most. She posted on a rhythm, clockwork, methodical, predictable in her unpredictability. Her fans knew her habits better than some of her family did. Every Wednesday, teaser; every Friday, drop; live streams, Q&As, private customs, all running on a cycle that, once interrupted, sent ripples through her digital world. Now, those ripples were becoming waves. By day 10, her comment sections had turned into message boards for worry. "Does anyone else think this is weird?" one user wrote. "She hasn't posted since Austin." Another noted she hadn't logged into Discord since the night she landed. A fan with a premium DM subscription said Savannah hadn't opened any messages since the morning after she checked in. At first, theories floated lightly: burnout, a weekend getaway, bad Wi-Fi. But soon, things turned. A screenshot circulated of someone claiming to have spotted her in a parking garage, followed by another insisting she'd ghosted a paid shoot with no refund. As the digital noise grew louder, a few began tagging her mother, digging up old Facebook posts, connecting dots no one was sure existed. Dee Lane was no stranger to her daughter's online world, but she didn't live inside it. She knew Savannah used social media for work, but she'd always kept a distance from the content itself. Their relationship had been complicated since Savannah dropped out of college and moved out on her own. They still texted on holidays. Occasionally. Her birthday passed last month without a call. That wasn't new, but when a stranger messaged her asking if Savannah was alive, something hit differently. At first, she was insulted. Then I was confused. Then it was quiet. Dee opened Savannah's Instagram and scrolled, realizing with a sinking feeling that she couldn't remember the last time they spoke, much less saw each other. Her instinct was to call. Savannah didn't answer. Then she tried again. Nothing. Voicemail. She sent a text. It stayed on delivered. The next day, it turned green. At first, Dee assumed her daughter had blocked her. They'd fought over small things before, over boundaries, over money, over Savannah's refusal to come home for Thanksgiving. But when she checked Savannah's apartment complex app to make an online rent payment, it flagged her login. "This account is past due." Savannah had always paid on time. Meanwhile, in Austin, the host of the Airbnb she had rented was having their own quiet panic. Not about Savannah, but about the fact that the smart lock still showed as active days after checkout. It wasn't unusual for guests to overstay by a night, forget to check out, lose track of time. But by day 5, the host had contacted Airbnb. When customer support couldn't reach the guest either, they flagged the unit. Technically, by platform rules, they weren't allowed to enter without notice, but the host assumed they were dealing with a squatter. Maybe someone local who knew how to manipulate the app and overstay for free. That had happened before. The platform instructed the host to send a third-party property manager to the unit. They left a notice on the door and knocked twice. No answer. When they peered through the peephole glass, the apartment looked dark, curtains drawn. No movement, no sound. The smell in the hallway hadn't grown strong enough to raise alarms, but there was something stale in the air, something damp. The property manager marked it as possibly vacant and reported back. A formal request was logged. The assumption was still logistical. Nothing felt like an emergency. Not yet. Back online, however, things were escalating. Savannah's fans had now begun comparing notes. They found her last known Uber trip, screenshots of messages she'd sent to followers hinting at doing something different in Austin, and speculated she was working with someone behind the scenes. A few claimed she'd mentioned feeling unsafe in a live stream weeks earlier, something about a man she'd seen more than once on her street. No one had recorded it, but the story repeated itself, like folklore. One follower even posted a map marking all known locations she'd recently tagged. The Airbnb tower in Austin became the epicenter. By the time Dee filed a missing person report, more than 2 weeks after Savannah had first checked into the rental, there was no sense of urgency from the department. Savannah was an adult, known to travel, known to work independently. There were no signs of foul play. Her phone had last pinged at the apartment location, but hadn't moved since. Police attempted a welfare check. The lock required an override code. By the time they accessed the unit, 19 days had passed since Savannah last posted. No one, not the fans, not the host, not her mother, had been prepared for what they would find inside. It was a Wednesday morning when the building's property manager finally decided to go up. The complaints had trickled in slowly, first about a lingering odor on the 19th floor, then about a strange buzzing noise heard by the unit next door. Most were written off. This was downtown Austin, after all. College kids, travelers, the city ran on chaos and late-night takeout. But by day 19, the apartment was still listed as occupied in the smart lock system, and no one had responded to the notice taped to the door. The host had stopped getting replies from Airbnb support, caught in an email chain that seemed more focused on liability than urgency. At that point, it wasn't about protocol. It was about instinct. Something wasn't right. The property manager knocked twice. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. When he pressed his ear to the metal frame, he thought he heard a low hum, like a phone vibrating somewhere far off. The hallway light flickered. He slipped on a pair of gloves, just in case, and reached for the master keycard override. But the lock didn't respond. The system had been remotely disabled, likely by the guest, days earlier. The only way in now was through law enforcement. He called the building security contractor and filed the report. Austin PD didn't rush. Welfare checks weren't emergencies unless there was immediate evidence of danger or a minor involved. But when the responding officer arrived 2 hours later, the smell had intensified. Not overwhelming, but wrong. Faintly sour, like old milk or rotten fruit. The hallway was silent. No footsteps, no TV sounds, no plumbing noises. Just that low, distant buzzing, like something electronic had been left running too long. The officer knocked and announced themselves. No response. They radioed in for approval to force entry under welfare check authority. When they pried the door open, the air shifted. It wasn't overpowering at first, just dense, like walking into a room that hadn't been aired out in weeks. The lights were off, curtains drawn. The temperature inside was colder than expected. The smart thermostat had been set to 64 degrees and left running constantly. That explained the hum. Everything else was untouched. Savannah's suitcase sat near the entrance, half unzipped, clothes still neatly folded. A red duffel bag leaned against the couch, camera equipment still inside. Her makeup was laid out on the bathroom counter in a careful line. A towel hung dry and unused on the rack. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no overturned furniture. But the strangeness was in the stillness. There was no food in the kitchen, no used plates, nothing in the trash can except for a receipt from the night she checked in. On the nightstand beside the bed, her iPhone was still plugged in, charging, screen black. Next to it sat a small notebook. Its cover was closed. Investigators would later note the absence of fingerprints. They cleared the apartment room by room. Closet, empty. Under the bed, clear. Balcony doors locked from the inside. Windows shut tight. But something about the apartment felt off. Lived in but not used. Occupied but untouched. Her shoes sat by the door, clean. The bed was half made. The fitted sheet had wrinkles on one side, like someone had lain there for a while. But there was no warmth, no scent of perfume. It was like the presence of a person had been erased, not taken. When Savannah's name was run through their system, the dispatcher confirmed she had an active missing person report filed just 2 days earlier by her mother. That changed everything. The officer requested a forensic unit. The scene wasn't designated as a crime scene, not yet, but it was now under full police control. They shut the door, taped it off, and logged every item in the apartment for evidence. The smart lock data showed her entry code had been used 3 times, once on the day she arrived and 2 more times within the following 36 hours. Then, nothing. After that, the only signal came from a remote override logged 6 days later, using an unregistered IP address. That access was brief, just under 4 minutes. It was unclear whether the door had physically opened during that window. There were no internal cameras, no hallway footage of anyone coming or going at that exact time. Detectives reviewed the phone, locked, no recent calls, no texts in the past week. The battery was still at 72%, despite being on the charger for days. One of the forensic techs would later note that the phone had been in airplane mode when they found it. No incoming signals, no outgoing pings. Savannah Lane was gone. Her belongings untouched. Her digital life paused mid-breath. No signs of violence, no suicide note, no exit strategy. It was as if she had been plucked from the room without making a sound. And while officers combed through the still air and faint odor, none of them had yet thought to open the fridge. That detail wouldn't come until the following morning, during the second sweep. And when they did, everything would change. The next morning, investigators returned to the unit for a second walkthrough. This time, they brought evidence bags, ultraviolet wands, a technician from digital forensics, and a forensic pathologist on standby, just in case. The lead detective, a 12-year veteran of missing persons, described the apartment as emotionally wrong. Not bloody, not chaotic, just wrong. The longer they stood inside, the more unnatural the silence felt. It wasn't just what was there, it was what wasn't. No wallet, no keys, no identification, no food in the cupboards, not even coffee or gum or a used water bottle. It was like someone had wiped down every surface, every smell, every trace of real life. They started documenting again, taking closer looks at the belongings. Her suitcase was neatly packed, except for a few missing outfits. Her makeup was untouched, brush bristles still stained with powder but dry to the touch. The camera tripod hadn't been used, its legs still folded, the lens cap still on. Whatever Savannah had planned to film, she never got to it. It was one of the techs who opened the fridge. She did it absent-mindedly, checking for perishables that could explain the faint odor in the unit. Inside, the top shelf was empty, except for a sealed bottle of wine and a gallon-sized Ziploc bag wedged beside it. At first glance, it looked like trash. But the shape was wrong. Inside the bag was a folded piece of paper, damp at the edges, the ink beginning to bleed. It wasn't labeled, just folded once, tightly, and sealed like someone didn't want the moisture to get in. The officer on scene opened the bag with gloves and unfolded the note carefully on the counter. It was written in black ink, shaky, in rushed handwriting. It read, "If I don't post tomorrow, something happened in this room." That was it. No name, no date, no signature. Just those 11 words written by someone who didn't expect to be around much longer. The room shifted after that. What had been labeled a welfare check was now a full-scale suspicious circumstances case. The unit was reclassified. More evidence markers were brought in. The bottle of wine was collected for prints. So was the plastic bag, the fridge handle, the countertops. The note was scanned and sent to handwriting analysis, then immediately secured in evidence custody. Detectives tried to reverse engineer the timeline. If Savannah had written the note, when had she done it? Before she disappeared? The day she arrived, after someone entered the unit, and why hide it in the fridge, a place no one would check unless they were looking? It didn't feel like a cry for help. It felt like a message left behind by someone who knew no one would find it unless they really started digging. The smart lock data was reviewed again. No new activity. The only remote access still showed as occurring on day 6 of her stay. No other access since. No fingerprints on the fridge handle, no usable DNA on the bag. A forensic chemist tested the paper for oils or blood. Nothing. The note had been folded too, tightly, handled too little, preserved too well. If it had been written in panic, it was done with eerie precision. Her phone, still locked and encrypted, was handed off to a cybercrime analyst. They pulled the internal timestamps. Last photo taken. Evening of her check-in. Last text sent, same night to a contact saved only as a content unknown. Last app opened, OnlyFans. She never posted anything from Austin. No scheduled drafts, no story updates, nothing, as if her work just stopped. Detectives spoke with the Airbnb host again, asking about previous guests in the unit. Nothing stood out. The host said Savannah had messaged once upon arrival to confirm the Wi-Fi worked. After that, silence. She never complained, never asked for towels, never mentioned feeling unsafe. But that one line, "Something happened in this room," turned the entire apartment into a suspect. Every piece of furniture, every corner. The bedding was pulled, the mattress lifted. UV scans showed faint traces of fluid near the edge of the bed, but tests later revealed it was a cleaning solution. The balcony was tested for shoe prints. Nothing matched her size. The air vents were unscrewed and scoped. Nothing. There was no sign of Savannah Lane. No sound of a struggle, no blood, no bruises on the walls or floor, no evidence of escape or restraint, just her belongings, untouched, her phone, still charging, and a note in the fridge that whispered something had gone terribly wrong. That night, the detective didn't sleep. He kept rereading the note, 11 words from a woman no one had seen in nearly 3 weeks. A woman who lived her life in front of thousands, but vanished in total silence. The question was no longer where Savannah had gone. The question was who had been in that room with her, and whether they ever left. The apartment's digital log revealed more than anyone expected. When investigators accessed the smart lock data from the Airbnb host's portal, they were looking for a simple timeline. Just a basic record of when Savannah entered and exited the unit. What they found instead raised the first real question of whether she'd ever truly been alone in that space. Her personal code had been used 4 times, once upon arrival, once the next morning, again that afternoon, and once more shortly after 9 p.m. the following night. After that, nothing. No checkout, no additional entries, no sign she ever left again. But what stood out wasn't what Savannah did. It was what she didn't do. On the 6th day of her stay, after nearly 72 hours of total silence, a remote unlock signal was logged by the system. It was short, 4 minutes, but the device ID didn't match Savannah's phone or her Airbnb account. The IP address came back unregistered, a burner device. Someone had accessed the apartment either while she was inside or after she was already gone. The lock company's back-end system showed that the remote access came from a mobile app, Session, but the profile used to trigger the command had been manually removed from the host's admin list less than 20 minutes later. Whoever used it knew what they were doing. They left no trace of the device's name, only a timestamp and the access duration. But the system recorded one last thing. The door had been physically opened during that 4-minute window. Someone walked in. Investigators immediately pulled footage from the building's hallway cameras. The corridor outside Savannah's unit was equipped with a single wide-angle surveillance cam installed by the property manager, mostly used for security complaints or noise disputes. The resolution was poor, and it only triggered recording based on motion, but at 2:14 a.m. on the night of the remote unlock, it caught a brief 7-second clip. A figure entered the frame at the far end of the hall. Medium build, black hoodie, dark jeans. The face was down, obscured by the hood. No light bounced off their shoes, no identifying details. The person moved toward Savannah's door, then disappeared from the frame. The camera never recorded them leaving. That, too, was explained away by a blind spot in the sensor. But it left a hole in the narrative that no one could fill. When police enhanced the clip, they spotted one detail. The person in the hoodie was wearing gloves. Black, tight, possibly neoprene. That explained the absence of fingerprints on the door handle, the fridge, the counters. This wasn't someone who stumbled in. It was someone who planned to leave no evidence behind. The remote access, when paired with the note found in the fridge, reframed everything. Savannah's words, "If I don't post tomorrow, something happened in this room," now felt deliberate, like she'd sensed something, maybe even seen someone. Investigators began re-interviewing people in her digital orbit, followers, subscribers, even fans who had private messaging access through her OnlyFans account. One username kept surfacing, HollowEyes_89, an anonymous account that had tipped her over $2,000 in the past 6 months, frequently commented on her posts, and once sent a cryptic message saying, "Bet you look better in person. One day I'll find out." The email tied to the account was a Proton mail address, no recovery email, no phone number. The IP logs showed erratic locations, New Mexico, Nevada, even Texas, but all were masked through VPNs. The account had been quiet since the day after Savannah disappeared. No comments, no logins, no activity. When officers subpoenaed OnlyFans for metadata, the company cooperated but admitted the user hadn't broken any platform rules. Nothing actionable. Just obsession hiding in plain sight. Back at the building, detectives interviewed tenants on the 19th floor. A couple from Unit 1903 mentioned hearing footsteps pacing during the first 2 nights. Then, nothing. Another resident said she saw a man lingering near the elevators late one night, looking confused, or like he was waiting for someone. No one called it in. There had been no screams, no bangs, no struggle, just the sound of pacing and silence. The theory of Savannah leaving voluntarily began to collapse. Her wallet, ID, and keys were still inside the unit. Her social accounts are inactive. Her bank card has been untouched since check-in. There were no rideshare logs, no bus tickets, no outgoing calls. The working theory now pointed to a targeted entry. Someone with digital access, someone who knew how to override a smart lock, walk into an apartment silently, and leave without being seen. Detectives tried to trace every subcontractor, cleaner, and lock system technician with prior access to the unit. No red flags, no background checks failed, no one with known connections to Savannah. The figure in the hoodie didn't match any ID photos, and yet, whoever they were, they had known how to enter without leaving a mark. By the end of the week, the case file had doubled in size. Savannah Lane had vanished without a trace, but someone had stood outside her door in the middle of the night. Someone had come in, maybe while she was alive, maybe not. And as her phone sat dead in evidence and the hallway clip looped endlessly in the precinct, investigators realized the most haunting part wasn't that she had disappeared. It was the thought that someone had been watching her, and might still be. The digital forensic unit began by pulling every piece of metadata tied to Savannah's online presence. Most of it centered on her work, her Instagram, her backup cloud, and her OnlyFans account. These weren't just platforms for her content, they were her business, her workspace, and, in some ways, her only daily human interaction. It wasn't uncommon for creators like Savannah to receive uncomfortable messages, inappropriate requests, or even threats. But in her case, the pattern of attention from one particular account stood out almost immediately. The username was HollowEyes_89. At first glance, it looked like just another premium subscriber. One of the thousands who paid monthly, occasionally tipped, occasionally flirted. But this one had spent over $2,800 in less than 6 months, more than any other user. Most of the payments were for innocuous things, custom videos, private chats, priority replies. But tucked in between the polite comments were messages that carried a different tone. There was one from 3 months ago. "You don't know it yet, but we'll meet." "I know we will." Another a week before her trip to Austin. "Texas is a good place to disappear." Less noise. They weren't overt threats, not enough to report, but they hinted at an obsession, one that had slowly escalated in intensity, especially as Savannah began pulling back from direct messaging. When police requested user data from OnlyFans, the platform complied. The account had been created with a Proton mail address, an encrypted email. Service with no recovery options, no name, no billing address. The payments had all been made through prepaid cards. Every layer had been designed to conceal identity. But the forensics team recovered something useful. In a cache of deleted text backups from Savannah's cloud, they found a series of private DMs to a friend from 2 nights before she vanished. In them, she wrote, "There's a guy in a black SUV. Keeps parking across from the building. He's not doing anything. Just sit there. Keep looking up. I swear I've seen him twice now. I don't know, maybe I'm being paranoid." Her friend had never replied. The team traced every camera in the area, traffic cams, garage feeds, a construction site lens across the street. After sifting through days of footage, they located what appeared to be a black SUV parked near the front entrance on 2 separate nights, one at 11:42 p.m. and another at 2:05 a.m. The license plate wasn't visible. The windows were tinted. The vehicle never lingered more than 15 minutes. Then it disappeared into the night. Investigators followed the only clue they had, the online alias. They scoured public databases, looked for similar usernames across Reddit, Telegram, obscure adult forums. The handle had been used before. A profile on a fetish site from 2 years back, long since inactive. Another tied to a burner Gmail used once to comment on a YouTube channel run by another adult content creator. That creator, when contacted, said the messages gave her the creeps. She'd blocked him after he sent a photo of her front porch, taken at night. That was 6 months before Savannah vanished. It was the first time investigators saw this for what it really was. A pattern. A person moving through digital spaces, targeting women who lived on camera but kept their real lives hidden. Someone who watched, waited, and chose his moments carefully. There was no forensic trail, no phone number, no real name. Just an online ghost who had once said he'd find her. Police canvassed the area around the Airbnb again, asking businesses for any overlooked footage. One corner shop handed over a drive from a faulty camera pointed at the street. The resolution was poor, corrupted in frames, but a few seconds stood out. A figure in dark clothing stood beside what looked like a black SUV. They weren't doing anything, just looking up toward the building. Then, the figure climbed into the driver's seat and drove off. The date stamp was 1 day before Savannah disappeared. Back at the precinct, Savannah's cloud account continued to yield fragments, draft captions, video thumbnails never uploaded, a photo of her standing on the balcony, blurred and slightly tilted, as if taken in motion. The last edit was time-stamped at 11:16 p.m. No content was posted after that, no videos uploaded, just one note in her drafts, unfinished. It read, "If I ever go missing," then nothing. The note in the fridge, the messages about the SUV, the burner identity with thousands in tips, it was all starting to line up. But it wasn't enough, not for a warrant, not for a face, not for a name. Savannah had been aware of something. She'd felt it, seen it, maybe even known who it was. But she hadn't left town. She hadn't canceled the shoot. She hadn't run. She'd stayed, because she didn't think anything would actually happen. And now, the man behind Hollow Eyes 89 has vanished too, just like her. When Savannah's phone was handed over to digital forensics, investigators knew there wouldn't be much left on the device itself. It had been powered off when they found it, still plugged into the charger on her nightstand, in airplane mode, without a fingerprint or smudge on the screen. But phones don't tell the whole story anymore. Savannah used cloud backups, auto-syncs for her files, footage, messages, drafts, everything tied to her creator accounts. The real data lived in the cloud. That's where they turned next. Her iCloud login was recovered using two-factor verification sent to her recovery email, one maintained under her legal name, one no one had accessed since the day she vanished. The logs were sparse. Someone had attempted to log in twice the week after she disappeared. Both failed. But what the forensic analyst did find buried in the recently deleted folder changed the direction of the entire investigation. There were 6 video files, all time-stamped between 10:34 p.m. and 11:17 p.m. on her second night in the Airbnb. 5 were short, under 3 minutes, static angles, mostly unedited, test shots, likely part of a setup. But the final clip, unnamed, corrupted at the end, was 10 minutes long. Only part of it was recoverable. It took several hours to decrypt and stabilize. What emerged was unnerving. The clip began with a shot of Savannah in front of the sliding glass doors, city lights behind her. She was wearing a long robe, hair down, makeup half done. She looked distracted. She adjusted the camera angle 3 times, walking in and out of frame, never speaking. The sound was mostly ambient, light traffic outside, the buzz of the refrigerator motor, a faint hum from the thermostat. At the 4-minute mark, something shifted. Savannah froze mid-movement, her head turning sharply toward the front door. She stepped closer to the camera, whispered something, inaudible due to audio corruption, but her lips moved with clear intent. She glanced off screen, then backed away slowly. Her eyes locked on something outside the frame. Her hand brushed the table near the camera, knocking a small object, a lipstick, onto the floor. Then the clip cut. The final 32 seconds were unrecoverable. Just black frames and distorted audio spikes. No upload attempt, no saved version, just this one corrupted file hidden in deleted storage. They played the clip over and over, trying to isolate her expression. It wasn't fear, not at first. It was confusing. Recognition, maybe, like she'd heard something familiar. A voice, a knock, a code being punched into the door. No one could say for certain. Her lips moved again right before the clip ended, but the words were unclear. They brought in a lip reader. The closest match? Is someone there? But even that was guesswork. There were no other files recovered from that night. Her photo library ended there. No selfies, no final texts, no emails, nothing scheduled, no exit trail. The video was never posted to her OnlyFans queue, never downloaded to any other device. It existed solely in the cloud, and only because the deletion hadn't yet passed the 30-day threshold. Investigators cross-referenced the timestamp with the hallway security footage, the grainy clip of the hooded figure entering the floor. It matched almost exactly with the moment Savannah looked up from the recording. The figure had appeared on camera at 2:14 a.m. The video clip was recorded between 10:34 p.m. and just after 11:15. That meant at least 3 hours went unaccounted for after the last known footage. Missing time. They searched again for any signs of forced entry, any overlooked prints, but the apartment remained sterile. Clean. Too clean. And now they had something even more unsettling. Proof that Savannah had sensed something, someone, just before her digital presence went dark. Proof that she was alive, alert, and possibly afraid just moments before everything cut off. The clip was reviewed by behavioral analysts, sound engineers, and threat assessment specialists. No one could say for sure what or who she heard. There were no raised voices, no crash, no scream. Just a quiet moment, a flicker of hesitation, then a silence that stretched endlessly. That's when detectives started to suspect this wasn't an accident or a spur-of-the-moment act. It felt coordinated, cold, executed with precision. Savannah had likely been watched, followed, perhaps even lured. Her digital life was planned and predictable. Her routine was mapped online. It wouldn't have been hard to track her schedule, guess her habits, know when she'd be alone. Whoever had entered that room didn't force anything. They'd been invited in by the very nature of how she lived and worked, but they still didn't have a name. Not from the footage. Not from the metadata. The man in the black SUV had vanished. The burner account remained silent. And now, all they had was a corrupted clip of a woman on the verge of discovery, standing inches from a door that may have sealed her fate. The screen fades to black. No scream. No crash. Just Savannah whispering into the void. And then, nothing. 3 weeks after the initial welfare check, the apartment had gone quiet again. The investigation stalled. There were no updates from the forensic lab, no new leads on the burner account, no confirmed identity for the figure in the hallway. The unit remained sealed until the end of the police hold. Once released, the Airbnb host, pressured by upcoming bookings, contacted a contracted cleaning service to prep the apartment for use again. The cleaner assigned had never heard the name Savannah Lane. To her, it was just another rental job, a deep clean, mop the floors, reset the linens. She arrived mid-morning, unlocked the door with a temporary code, and stepped into the same stillness police had walked into weeks earlier. But this time, the air had changed. There was a smell. Not strong, not overpowering, but sickly and persistent. The windows had remained sealed. The thermostat had finally stopped running. The air was stale and heavy. She opened every cabinet, wiped down every surface, and rechecked the bathroom. Then she got to the kitchen. The smell was stronger near the refrigerator. She assumed it was food residue, maybe something police or prior guests had missed. She pulled the fridge out slightly from the wall to clean behind it, using a glove to sweep debris from underneath. But what she found instead made her freeze. The floor beneath the fridge wasn't solid. There was a gap. Part of the wall behind it had been disturbed. A jagged tear in the drywall, hidden behind the appliance's lower paneling. The insulation had been clawed or ripped away. Something had been shoved in. She backed away and called the host. The host called the building manager. The building manager called the police. Within 2 hours, crime scene technicians were back inside. This time, they brought cadaver dogs. The lead dog alerted immediately. Behind the fridge, tucked deep in the wall cavity, wrapped in what appeared to be a makeshift liner of silver insulation foam, were partial human remains, decomposed beyond recognition. The smell, now finally exposed, turned thick and unmistakable. Savannah Lane had never left the apartment. She'd been there the entire time. Dental records confirmed it. Forensics took less than a day. Savannah's body had been folded tightly, hidden in a space no wider than a carry-on suitcase. The coroner noted blunt force trauma to the back of her skull, but no defensive wounds. No blood evidence in the apartment. Toxicology was inconclusive due to the state of decomposition. There were no clear ligature marks, no signs of prolonged struggle. She had been killed quickly, or silenced by other means, and concealed in a part of the apartment that had never been thoroughly searched. Police had pulled open drawers, lifted mattresses, opened closets, but they hadn't moved the fridge. The betrayal of that detail was gutting. For Savannah's family, for the officers, for everyone who'd stood in that room, unaware she was just feet away. The insulation in the cavity had been cut, restuffed, then covered with a sheet of aluminum foil taped from the inside. Whoever did it had prepared for it. They didn't panic. They didn't run. They stayed long enough to clean and hide her body in a place that wouldn't be checked unless someone moved the entire appliance, something no one had done in the initial search. Investigators reviewed the smart lock data again. No entries after day 6, which meant that whoever hid the body did it during the same 4-minute window when the remote unlock occurred. 4 minutes. That's all it took. Either the killer had been inside already, waiting for the right time to conceal what they'd done, or they returned to finish the job, slipping past an already cold scene and leaving no new trace behind. The cleaner who found the remains left the job immediately. She was later interviewed in tears, haunted by what she'd almost touched. Savannah's mother was told by detectives over the phone, then brought in to identify her daughter's belongings. What she asked, through sobs, was the same question everyone in the department was now asking themselves. How is it possible that a woman with thousands of followers, a digital trail, a paper trail, cameras in the hallway, a note in the fridge, and her phone still charging next to her bed, had vanished right under their noses? And how had her body been inside the apartment the entire time, hidden by someone who knew how to move silently, clean efficiently, and disappear without setting off a single alarm? That question would hang over the investigation for months, because now they weren't just chasing a mystery. They were chasing a ghost who had walked into a locked apartment, left without a trace, and placed Savannah somewhere no one thought to look. Not even the people paid to find her. As the investigation narrowed, so did the digital footprint. The remote unlock that occurred on the 6th night, the 4-minute window that shifted everything, had remained a critical piece of the puzzle. For weeks, no one could trace the device that triggered it. There was no email login, no verified IP address, just a dead-end log entry on the lock manufacturer's server. But when the company released back-end metadata under a secondary subpoena, one technician noticed something strange. The remote access hadn't come from a user. It had come from an administrative override, a tier of access only granted to a third-party security contractor assigned by the property owner. The Airbnb host didn't even know it existed. The company had outsourced that function months earlier, part of a bulk property deal involving over 100 smart units in the city. The firm responsible was a private digital security vendor called Luma Access. When detectives requested their logs, one name surfaced: Eric Halbert, 34, freelance technician, contracted to install and maintain smart locks in downtown Austin. His badge had been used to access the lock system 2 days before Savannah disappeared, supposedly to run a remote diagnostics test on the unit's battery performance. He never disclosed that visit. He never mentioned the building when first interviewed. When officers questioned him formally, Eric claimed he had no memory of Accessing that specific apartment, he admitted to running tests from his admin dashboard, but said they were routine, automatic, done in batches. He denied knowing Savannah, denied ever being in the unit, denied ever using remote unlock. He seemed calm, cooperative. But when they pulled his phone's location data, warranted under probable cause, it told a different story. At 2:11 a.m. on the night Savannah's lock was remotely opened, Eric's phone pinged off a cell tower just 50 feet from the building. A second ping placed him less than 1 block away, 5 minutes later. It was a tight window, a time frame that matched the remote unlock nearly to the second. When confronted, Eric said he was driving home from a friend's house. No friend was named, no text confirmed it, no GPS history. His call logs were blank. Detectives searched his apartment, no hard drives, no devices linking him directly to Savannah. His computer had been wiped clean 2 days prior. He claimed he was refreshing his system after a malware alert. His phone had no social media apps, no dating profiles, no messages. All had been deleted. Even his Uber history had been cleared. But what stood out more than the data was his past. A sealed juvenile record in another state. The details weren't public, but through back-channel legal access, detectives confirmed the charge: unlawful surveillance. At 17, Eric had installed hidden cameras in a neighbor's house. He'd been sent to a diversion program. No jail time. He was never charged as an adult. When asked about it, he became silent, said it was a mistake, and part of the reason he stayed away from people now. They checked the smart lock system again. Eric's badge hadn't just accessed Savannah's unit. It had accessed over 20 properties across the city in the months prior, all during the early morning hours. Nothing had been reported, nothing stolen. But the timing, the quiet entries, the pattern, they couldn't ignore it anymore. Still, it wasn't enough. No prints placed him inside the apartment. The only DNA found in the unit belonged to Savannah. The insulation cavity behind the fridge contained nothing but trace organic matter. No foreign hairs, no epithelial cells. No camera caught Eric entering the building. His name wasn't on any visitor logs. The hoodie-clad figure from the hallway footage couldn't be identified. There was no weapon, no confession, no direct connection between him and Savannah other than that one silent digital signature. The DA's office hesitated. Without physical evidence, without witness testimony or digital correspondence, they couldn't file charges. Eric retained a lawyer, released a statement denying involvement. He said he was being scapegoated, that his past mistakes were clouding judgment. He called Savannah's death a tragedy, but maintained he'd never met her, never entered the unit, never even heard her name before the investigation. Detectives watched him walk out of the interview room, knowing in their gut that something was off. They believed he was lying. They believed he had been there. But believing wasn't enough to prosecute. And so, Savannah Lane's case moved into limbo. The body had been found. The door had been opened. The note had been written. But the man who had the key, the one person who could access the lock, who had no alibi, whose phone placed him at the scene, stood outside the reach of the law. Untouched. Protected by the absence of proof. Free. But they weren't done watching him. The decision not to prosecute came quietly. No press conference, no prepared statements. Just a short email from the district attorney's office addressed to the lead detective. Insufficient evidence to proceed at this time. Behind that sentence sat a mountain of frustration, months of surveillance, digital trails, interviews, forensic analysis, all pointing in one direction. But not one piece of it could stand on its own in court. No fingerprints, no DNA, no video of entry or exit, no weapon, no confession, just suspicion, implication, and a trail that led straight into legal quicksand. Eric Halberd disappeared from public view almost overnight. He quit his contract with the smart lock company, deleted all his professional accounts, moved out of his Austin apartment. The last ping from his phone came from a small motel off Interstate 10 near the Texas border, 3 days after his final interview. After that, nothing. His bank account remained untouched. His name no longer appeared on employment logs. It was as if he'd known this was coming and had prepared for it. Back online, Savannah's story refused to go quiet. Within weeks, podcasts picked it up. Reddit threads lit up with timelines, theories, screenshots of her final Instagram post. Her note, the one found folded in the fridge, became a kind of digital warning, a haunting message from someone who saw something coming and couldn't stop it. "If I don't post tomorrow, something will happen in this room." Those words were copied into TikTok captions, turned into thread openers, even printed on t-shirts. But beneath the online noise was something colder, an emptiness, because the one thing that mattered most still hadn't happened. No justice, no trial, no arrest. The Airbnb where she stayed was quietly delisted. The host made no public comment. Guests who had booked it in the weeks after her disappearance were offered refunds. The building management refused to speak to reporters. The unit sat vacant for nearly a year before being sold in a bulk property transfer, remodeled and renumbered. But everyone in that building, residents, employees, security, still remembered. No matter how they tried to erase it, that room had changed everything. Savannah's mother, Dee, held on to what little she had left: the suitcase, the charger, a half-used bottle of her perfume, her phone, which police returned months later, sat locked in a drawer. Dee didn't know the passcode. She refused to factory reset it. "That's still hers," she told one reporter. "I'm not touching it." She kept Savannah's Instagram profile active. Every month on the 25th, she posted a new photo, some candid memory from a life that felt further away with each post, always ending with the same caption: "Justice is waiting." She never checked out. Despite the DA's decision, the case was not officially closed. It remained classified as an open homicide. But without leads, it slipped further into the backlog. Detectives were reassigned. The digital evidence was archived. The hallway footage of the hooded figure was pulled from the server and placed into long-term evidence storage. The cloud file of Savannah's final video, corrupted and incomplete, was copied 3 times, labeled, and locked in a case folder. But nothing new ever came. The man behind the alias Hollow Eyes, _89, was never found. Some believed it was Eric. Others thought he was just another ghost, a second predator, a false lead. Savannah's online footprint had been too exposed, her routine too visible. The life she'd built for herself, fiercely independent, digitally dependent, had left her vulnerable in a way she never saw coming. And the person who exploited that had walked through a smart lock, left behind a fridge, a note, and a hollow in the wall where her body stayed hidden for 3 weeks. Years later, her case still surfaces in listicles and late-night YouTube dives. The OnlyFans girl who never checked out. But for those closest to her, it's not content. It's not a mystery. It's a loss. An unanswered question that gets heavier every year. A girl who told the world exactly where to look if something went wrong, and was still missed. And somewhere out there, the person who did it, if it was Eric or someone else entirely, lives in silence, untouched, anonymous, confident that silence and absence are all it takes to outlast a case like this. But Dee Lane still posts, still waiting. And every month, her words echo across timelines. She never checked out.